out of curiosity, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your satisfaction overall? And then whatever they say, if it's not a 10, the follow-up question I like is, what would make that a 10? Now, this is where you want to kind of start to take some notes, because this is where you got to start picking up stuff to come back and sell with on a service basis or on a marketing basis or whatever you want it to be.
Hello and welcome to the Max Revenue Show. I am your host, Trey Shields, along with the Zen Master of Commercial Insurance himself, Micah Salas. Micah, how are you today?
Namaste.
Namaste. Per recent developments, as you probably know, this podcast is brought to you by none other than Insurance Xdate. Shout out to, just do this, do the X. Like, who is it used to do that in WWF or whatever?
Well, man, I can't remember, but I'm just thinking of DMX. X will give it to you. Yeah.
So shout out to Rob and the guys over at Insurance Xdate. Mike and I both use it. I actually waiting for you to get on the call. I was actually going through it and scrubbing my list for my call block that's going to come after this. We record this podcast, and going through and sifting through names and then setting basically a to-do task to call them at 2:30 today. So it's not just smoke and mirrors. We both use it and both love the product. So go check it out. Link in the show notes. I believe the tagline is, what is it? Find more leads, win more biz, or something like that.
I don't know what their tagline is, but I think they should just transition to the line I said. You know, it's like oxygen for a producer.
Oxygen for producer. So today we wanted to talk about, today's episode, I think, is called the First Meeting Formula or some variation on that. But we just want you to run us through kind of your thoughts around first meetings, how you structure them, how you go about them, almost kind of start off with like how you get in the door for that first meeting. And what I'm getting at is, I know sometimes you talk about how actually kind of the first call, a lot of times, depending on how far it goes, actually kind of qualifies as a first meeting because you're asking the questions to the prospect on the cold call what you would be asking them in person on a first meeting. So I just want you to go through first meeting, all things first meetings in this episode, and explain like I'm five, how you go about it.
Yeah. So, I try to set up the meeting and the reason that a lot of the times first phone calls turn into first meetings is because my script, and I'm saying a lot of the times, it changes, but a lot of times I'm saying, what's your due diligence process look like? And then when they ask, what do you mean by due diligence? I'm not saying, well, can I meet with you and I'll explain it? I'm just going to start. I'm like, well, if they're asking, obviously they have the time, right? So I'm going to quickly be able to explain in a succinct answer what due diligence is. And sometimes that just leads to then I'm not going to cut off a conversation, right? So if we start talking for 7-10 minutes, to me, I've had a lot of really good first meetings that we end up winning, or at least getting to the due diligence phase that only literally need to last 5 to 10 minutes because people just get it. They're like, yep, I have a pain point. I have curiosity. I have some pain I'm dealing with. You have a way of kind of quantifying that and checking into my deal, making sure that pain's legitimate, or maybe there's some pain I don't even know about. I like it. You made it simple. All right. What do you need? Policies. Okay, great. And policies in a conversation. So don't try to overcomplicate this. Don't try to feel like you got to talk more than you need to. Don't try to sound more sophisticated and using all these big words and throwing out this data and these resources or these value add. Like, I did research on your construction industry, and I know people are dealing with labor shortages and showing all this great information that you have. Those kind of things should just come up in your conversation. They shouldn't need to be like a PowerPoint that you're talking about at a first meeting with a prospect to show how much you know about their business. Because you know way less than you know when it comes to being a construction company or a real estate company. So, and you're there for a reason. So my thing is, just get to the point. Don't be long-winded and determine if it makes sense to go to the next steps or not. Anything you want to add on that before I kind of keep rambling?
No, I like that. One thing I was going to say is, you and I were talking about something earlier. I won't go into what it was specifically regarding, but I told you I was having a conversation with a sales guy who wasn't in the industry, but clearly was selling into the industry. And he was like trying to talk to me about certain things. And it's like, you could tell that he had I think the word is cursory knowledge, like a general understanding But as far as like super detailed and like how all the pieces work together, he didn't have. It's not like the guy came across as a loser or anything, but it's just, I told you about it and I was like, when you try to get out over your skis and you try to you just have to be careful because you can come across as a know-it-all or get, kind of get out there over your skis and you just kind of look silly. And the thing is, you don't even realize you look silly because you think you know what you're talking about, but it's obvious you don't.
Dude, it kind of goes back to the script, right? And it's the whole reason that when I would call these big CEOs and executives, what diffused all my fear and also at the same time, ironically, made me sound like a peer and speak with way more confidence was just keeping it super simple. And so when I could just go and say, cold call CEO and say, hey, I know you have an agent. I'm not looking to quote, but what's your guys' due diligence process look like? I just feel like if I'm a CEO and some guy's talking to me like that versus some guy saying, yeah, hey, it's Micah. I help contractors that are between 10 and 20 million in sales reduce their cost of insurance and make sure they have the best coverage. Would you have 20 minutes to talk? Like, to me, like if I'm a CEO and someone's calling me with that, I'm like, okay, maybe if I have pain, but overall it's like, dude, no. Versus a guy that just calls me like a human and just says, hey, what do you guys do for due diligence? I'm just going to engage in that conversation. All right. So let's just say we set a meeting, it doesn't matter if it's virtually or in person. Ever since COVID, I will say this, a lot of my first meetings do end up being Teams or phone calls first versus in-person first meetings. Now, if they're local, I try to push for it. Definitely, I try to get in person for that second meeting where I'm actually presenting and all that, trying to close the deal, I guess you could say. But it's not necessary. I mean, I've closed several deals where I never meet the people in person. So, okay, you get to the first meeting. What I like to generally do is open up with a quick statement. I'll make small talk, whatever. If I feel that this goes back to being a chameleon and being adaptable. If I sense that person wants to make small talk all day long, I'll talk for 20 minutes about small talk with the guy if he wants to go that route. But in my mind, I think, okay, most buyers don't want to do that. So I'm definitely prepared to go right into it and just go boom, boom, boom and be out in 5 minutes. So you got to be prepared mentally for whatever the buyer is going to throw at you when you walk into their office, because you just don't know when you're meeting someone for the first time what they're going to be like. Okay, so you get there and let's just say they got 15, 20 minutes and they're not a small talker. They're like, hey, let's get to the point. And those are sometimes more of the harder ones, right? Because you're like, oh, okay, just got to get into it. So I just start by thanking people. Hey, appreciate the time. I know we put 20 minutes on the calendar. Does that still work for you, Bob? Yes. Great. Okay. Well, I just want to start off by basically saying, I know I'm not a fit for everybody and there's no pressure with this meeting at all. I'm not going to sit here and twist your arm at the end. My goal for today's meeting is pretty simple. I want to talk a little bit about your company at a high level, 50,000 foot view a little bit. And I want to talk about the insurance program and kind of your experience around that. And then just share with you a different approach that we've utilized to help a ton of different contractors. And then if at the end of this, you think it makes sense for you and it can help you, great. And if not, no worries. Sound good? And anytime you want to jump in. And is there anything specific that you want me to talk about at this meeting though? So that might be some way you could kind of weave that one phrase into that first opening part, however you want to. You could lead with that. Be like, hey, before I jump into anything, I just want to make sure, is there anything you want to specifically talk about today? Or is there a specific reason that you wanted to meet with me today? You could open it that way too, right? And then get in, and then whatever they say, a lot of times people are like, no, we're just kind of meeting with people. You're like, okay, great. And then you can get into your, hey, we're not a fit for everyone. I just want to talk high level and blah, 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 what I just said, right? That's kind of the intro. And then let's just say they say, okay, yeah, sounds good. So then where do you go from there? So I start with an overview of the company. I zoom out beyond just insurance. I just want to go high level, not to get into it. Again, I don't want to talk 10 minutes about their business. Now, if they want to talk, we'll let them. But I say, hey, obviously, I know you're an excavating contractor. I did some research before the call. We talked a little bit when I called you initially. That's why I reached out to you. But I always like to hear it from the horse's mouth, I guess, because websites aren't always accurate and the information I can find online isn't necessarily chock full of detail. So can you just give me some background on your company? How'd you start it? What's the story about how you started and how you got to where you're at today? And then also maybe just share what exactly you do. How are you guys generating revenue? And just leave it there. That's as simple as that, guys. So let them talk. Some people will be very short. Some will be long with it. Doesn't matter. And then the question, do you take notes or not? A lot of times I don't. Maybe right after the call, I'll jot some things out, or I might have a pen with me and I'll just jot a couple keywords, I'll have a pen and paper usually handy. But I don't necessarily write full-blown sentences and try to record every word that they're talking. It's more just listening, looking them in the face, and being a human, right? Okay, so hey, where are you at today? How did you get there? That's the first kind of part. And then, hey, where do you want to be in the next 2 to 3 years? Like, what's the goals for the company? Just high level. People love talking about their company, man, especially if you're talking to an owner. Now, with a CFO or controller, these questions might not hit as well. So just know who you're talking to. But still, even a controller, CFO, especially CFOs, they'll still have a vision, right? Now, controller, office manager, that's where it's like, they might not really, that question of where do you want to be in 2, 3 years or 5 years, that might not really resonate with them. So I like to ask that question. And then after hey, where do you want to be? It's like, okay, what's your biggest challenges? What's holding you back? I know I hear from a ton of people, labor, this and that. But is there anything out of the ordinary that's just grinding your gears, right? Let them talk. After that, now you have a good understanding of their business. And I've had a lot of people since I've been doing this for like 10 years, using this kind of intro approach, be like, man, I've never had people ask me questions like this, or just like, I like your approach. You seem more like consultative, holistic, just by asking these generic questions beyond just getting right into insurance, right? So before you jump right into insurance, take a step back and do this. Anything you want to add, Trey, to that, or okay?
No, I mean everything I know is what you've told me, so I'm just along for the ride on this one. I feel like this is your baby. I feel like I feel very confident talking about how to make a lot of calls and get a lot of meetings. I feel like this is definitely a hole in my game. I'm great at getting in the door. What I'm bad at is I'm bad at converting the at bats. So yeah. I'm more all ears today.
That's cool. All right. So you've talked high level. Now you transition, and that should take you guys that will take anywhere from, let's just call it 2 minutes if you have a non-talker, up to 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. So then they talk. You don't really say much back. You just chime in, and then you go to the next, which is now we get into the insurance a little bit. So you say, hey, all right. So let me kind of dive into the insurance a little bit more. Let's dial in on the insurance specifically. I'm just a couple of questions out of curiosity on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being you love your insurance agent, the whole experience, your cost is amazing. How would you rate your satisfaction overall? And then whatever they say, if it's not a 10, the follow-up question I like is, what would make that a 10? Now, this is where you want to kind of start to take some notes, because, we talk about doing due diligence. Sometimes you do due diligence, you find nothing wrong. This is where you got to start picking up stuff to come back and sell with, on a service basis or on a marketing basis or whatever you want it to be. This is the time where you take notes, you listen, and this is where people can maybe start to open up, right?
The thing you just said, I think, is probably the smartest thing of the whole first meeting, is what would make it a 10, right? Because they know why you're there, right? And so, you're there because you're trying to get their business, and they know that. And so they probably come across guarded. But there's just something about the positioning of that question. They're not admitting that their agent's not really good, but there's, you know what I'm saying? Like, they don't have to admit that they're not good, but if what would make it a 10, they're kind of giving you a peek behind the curtains without necessarily being conscious of it as to where the holes are. And they may know that there's holes there and they're still just have their guard up, or what I actually find a lot is they're unconscious that what they're actually dealing with, they're totally unaware that what they're dealing with is suboptimal or that it's not the best for them. So either way, I think that's such a smart question. And I know that you didn't come up with it, but I give you credit for it. So
I don't know where I took that from. It was probably I think spin selling kind of has I've read various sales books over the span of my life. I get bored of a lot of them because they're kind of redundant. So I honestly don't read many books on sales anymore, but once a year I'll bust out a sales book and read it. But thank you for that backhanded compliment. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Redundant, like two idiots talking about insurance and the same 10 to 15 topics.
Yeah.
Like redundant like that.
Sure. Okay, you asked that question. Another question I like to ask, and you don't have to ask all these, but might be, hey, are you guys having a lot of claims? And so I like to ask this to people. Some people fired up, we pay so much money for our insurance and never have a claim, man. We're an insurance underwriter's dream, right?
Yeah. Running like a 50% loss ratio.
Yeah, you get the real loss runs. It tells a whole different story. But this is also important because part of the due diligence process that we're setting up here is that we don't need to get loss history, right? Because of this question, because we have to ask them at some point, hey, what do your claims look like? And we can ask that in the research meeting, which we're not going to talk about here, or we can ask that here as well and try to get that. So at least when you get the policies and all of, you see the rates and you start to look through things, you kind of have some sense of, okay, yeah, they had a death claim 2 years ago. So that's probably why, and it just helps you out. It also could be a good opportunity for you to weave in if it's a captive prospect, like that whole talk. And so, they're spending $1 million and they have a 10% loss ratio. Well, this is a great segue into that, that talk track, which again, I'm not going to get down a rabbit hole there, but so keep that in mind. And then then the third question I ask is, hey, what's your process look like for doing due diligence over the last, couple renewal cycles? What have you guys done? And this is important because I want to know, have you been with your broker 5 years, never talked to anyone? Do you shop every year? Did you have some guy did a policy review for you 2 years ago? Like, I want to know exactly what you did. And then the follow-up questions, so these are just a framework. These are the starting questions. Ask follow-up questions. If it lends itself to asking a question, like if they just say, oh yeah, we've quoted every year. Okay, great. How's that worked out? Do you guys like doing that? Or what's the thinking behind it? Help me understand why you keep doing it if you haven't changed agents. So whatever the question is, you just got to kind of read the person in the room, the situation. But I like to ask those three questions because one is kind of you're getting into just overall experience and pain. The second one, when you're asking about their performance, their profitability, you kind of get an idea for their claims and their culture and that side of it. And then the third, you're just more so asking about the renewal experience because all those end up being usually the reasons people make a change of agents, right? So that's after gathering that, I'm like, all right, I sounds good. Before I just kind of briefly give you an overview of due diligence, what that looks like, how it helps you, to make sure we're on the same page here, what's your understanding of the insurance game and how it works? And by game, I mean the distribution process. When you try to go get quotes with a different agent, do you know how that kind of works behind the curtain? And just stop. A lot of times people say, I think I know, and they'll just might start saying, yeah, like you can't get multiple agents can't quote the same, but that's kind of all I know. So definitely enlighten me. Or usually it's something along that line. If you get a know-it-all who knows exactly everything, then you can kind of bypass, you can quickly cover the game, explaining it, how it works. But if you get someone who doesn't know, take the time, go through it all. But either way, it shouldn't take you longer than, 2 to 3 minutes to really hit the main points of it. This is where using some visuals can also help the whole picture. I think we include this in the max revenue course, but it's like you got the ABs, or you got the client, and then you got two brokers, and you got the market. Mm-hmm. They're all crossing lines. Every broker now uses that. I think people have been using that for 10 years to kind of help show this. So you can use that as a helpful. I know one guy that I work with has had a lot of good success using that at these kind of first meetings and showing people like, hey, this is what you can do, or you can do this, because people like visuals, right? I used to just draw it I would literally just take like a piece of paper, dude, and I would just draw it. And I would say, hey, here's kind of how the game works. We got you, your agent, three markets, right? There you go. And then your agent he has this market right here. I'm showing this for those listening. I'm showing a piece of paper. This is you and your carrier. There's these other two out here, and you bring in me to get quotes, but me and your agent have the same contracts. So we try to go to the same three carriers. Those other two carriers, your agent already has their information. He's going to get there first because he's going to be tipped off. I'm trying to get quotes when I ask for loss history. So then I'm going to be blocked. You're going to be frustrated as a buyer because you invest all this time with me and I don't improve your situation. Or you meet with me. I try to sneak out to the market or race to the market first. And then your current guy who you kind of like, right? Yeah, he's great. He tries going to the market. Then he calls you pissed off because he's like, man, I'm trying to do my job, but I'm blocked at 2 of the 3 markets, dude. And now you're kind of like frustrated, right? And then at this point, they're usually the person you're calling is like, yeah, that's kind of weird. So then I'll say to kind of steer the conversation. So you're probably wondering at this point, then like, how do you ever change agents or how do people ever make a change if this is kind of how it works? Because these underwriters will only release one quote to one agent and all agents have the same, basically represent the same carriers or fishing out of the same pond. Yeah. Like what happens? What the best buyers are doing right now, and the people having the most success with their insurance program is they are using one agent. They're not trying to go to multiple agents and muddy up the marketplace and cost themselves leverage and then have to make compromises by picking an agent who's maybe inferior, but they have to go with them because they got to the best market first. All those games don't have to be played. The best buyers are treating it like they would if they were picking a real estate agent, right? You don't sell your house with multiple real estate agents. You pick one that you trust the most, that's going to represent you the best, that's going to make your life the easiest, and do all that good stuff that you want. Or a pro athlete picks one agent, right? Because again, the buyer pool is not unlimited, and it's limited. All agents have the same contracts, and they're all just paid a commission. Same commission. They don't bake in their overhead costs into your price or anything like that. So the best buyers are picking one agent. So you might be wondering at this point, well, like, what am I supposed to do? Just fire my agent based off of lip service or a song and a dance that you tell me? And this is literally what I'll say to people, right, as I'm talking. And they'll be like, yeah, I mean, yeah. And I'll say, yeah. And I don't want to come out here and ask and to be hired right now necessarily. I don't know if I can improve your situation. Sounds like you like your agent. They're decent. But what I've done for people is due diligence, and that's why I call it. It's a simple process. It helps you answer 3 questions. Am I overpaying? Am I missing something? Is there something differently I could be doing to attract more interest from underwriters to improve my situation? And in order to answer those questions, it's pretty simple. All I need is copies of your policies to start. And then we'll schedule a 20-minute research call at some point for me to ask some questions. I'll compile all that information. I'll do some market research. I'll come up with some strategies, some ideas. I'll come back with notes on where you're currently at today, how you compare to the market, and I'll share that with you. And then when I share it with you, it's super simple. You can hire me or not, right? You don't have to. I'm not going to sit here and twist your arm. I'm not going to play those games. I'm not going to make mountains out of molehills. I'm just going to come here, present it, and like I said, you could hire me, and if you choose not to, I get that too. That's your choice. But I'm not about being pushy. That's not my style. So how does that sound?
Oh my gosh, where do I sign? Sign me up, sir.
Yeah. But so right there, I changed how I explained the game a little bit because I started with this piece of paper, right? And this picture. And I used to do that a lot. The one, if you say there's like a tree at that point, what way do you want to go? You could go the picture route and kind of go the route I just told you. Another route that I like to go is kind of going really high level with it. Being, all right, so basically with insurance, there's 2,500 property casualty insurance companies out there. But once you filter it down for geographic location, size, type of risk, etc., that pool goes from 2,500 down to maybe 5, maybe 7 if you're lucky, maybe 2 if you're unlucky. So a handful of carriers. Those insurance carriers, those 5 or 6, they only sell through agents. Agents have to have contracts with these carriers to represent them, to bring you quotes. All the agents are paid the same by commission. Our overhead costs aren't built into your premiums or anything like that. So that doesn't matter. We're just middle people. Agents will only quote with one agent, and that's the agent that gets their first that year. So 99% of the time, it makes sense if you really think about it. Why it doesn't make sense to go to have 3 different agents go to 4 different accounts that they could all, or carriers that they could all go to. There is some exceptions. Sometimes there is some carriers that an agent might not have a contract with, but most agents have similar contracts. So yeah, that's how the game kind of works behind the scenes. So it's different than buying, a plumbing fixture or asking for plumbing services, where that plumber, all the plumbers are going to have their different overhead costs and different rates they're charging. Again, insurances, we're just middle people. The carriers are the one who come up with the rates, and we just bring you them. Obviously, we tell your story. There's a lot of other stuff we do, but because of that, that's how it works. What a lot of the successful companies are doing is they're saying, well, quoting doesn't make sense. And so the other option is I can divide up markets, which why would I want to do that really? Like I'm working with 2 different agents, and what's the point when I have one agent that can go to all 5? And so what people are doing is they're just picking an agent. They're hiring an agent. They're using a hiring approach, right? And they're going with one agent exclusively. And the reason this approach can work really well and has worked well, one, it saves you a lot of time and headaches, but also underwriters get way more excited when one agent's going to the market. They know that their odds of winning that account are much higher when they get a submission and that agent can say, yes, I control this account. So you're giving your agent way more leverage in the marketplace, way more authority when they're talking, way more confidence. And underwriters are busy nowadays. The submissions are through the roof. They want to work on deals that they can really win. And so again, using one agent, and when an agent goes to them and says, I control this account, that helps you get to the top of the stack better. Obviously, when I usually get to this point, people are maybe wondering, maybe you are, Trey, like, dude, so like, what am I supposed to just hire you? Like, I don't get how am I just supposed to hire you? And I would say there's agents will come out here and say, sign a BOR today. I honestly don't know enough about your business. I don't know enough about your current program, how it's working. What I'd like to do to give you a chance to get to know me better and for me to get to know you better and see if it's really makes sense to work together. And I think we can genuinely help is to start with due diligence. The simple process. All I need is copies of your policies. There's no applications, no paperwork. All I need is the policies to start in a 20-minute conversation with you. The policies, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at your rates, compare them to the market, show you exactly if I think you're overpaying or not. Look at your coverages, let you know if I think you're missing or you got any blind spots. I'm going to do some market research. I'm going to talk to underwriters to see, have you seen this account? When's the last time? Why'd you decline it? Because you can't go on Google and get these questions answered. You need someone like myself to answer those questions. And then I'll also create some strategies for you and come back and be like, hey, this is how we would tell your story in the market. Here's how we would ensure you get the best deal, make you the most attractive to underwriters. I'll come back and share that with you, and then you can decide if you want to work with us. At that point, I will ask for an agent of record letter, or I might walk away. Now, if I review everything and you're still not comfortable signing an AOR, we could talk quoting maybe if you think it makes sense. But usually, it's one of two things: it's hire me or quote, or it's hire me or stay put, right? But I'm not opposed to going on that other path if that's what makes sense. After I review everything, maybe there's a market we have or don't have, whatever. So how does that sound?
Now, between you, me, and the listener, that's our tip of the spear. But we will have a fallback position to quoting if we have a good look at the markets. We feel like we can get access to something the current agent doesn't have, and we feel like we can win. So that's definitely something that you have evolved on over the last 24 months. But I think the way that you just said it, like positioning it as like, it's not BOR or nothing to the prospect, but it's like, hey, at the end of this, one or two things are going to happen. You know, either you're going to want to hire me or you're going to want to stay put. And like just setting it up that way, you're not really giving them a third option. So then if they say, well, you know, and this happens all the time, at least for me anyways, there's a lot of people who are like, I really liked what you had to say. I totally get it. I just can't quite fire my guy. You know, and I'm dealing with that with somebody right now out of Florida. And it's like, so I'm having to play the quote game. And the reason why I did quote is because I had, you know, the two main markets that the incumbent doesn't have. But that's always a fallback position. That the agent of record's kind of the tip of the spear. Or I would say the due diligence is tip of the spear.
Correct. That's the thing you're trying to sell them on, because you can decide to quote it after the due diligence. And here's the thing, guys. In this first call, you don't even have to mention that quoting is an option. So for the first 7-8 years, I never mentioned that because in my mind, it was AOR or nothing. And so then you kind of do get people that are like, let me think about it. Because they know if they go down this due diligence path now, they're kind of going to have a decision to make, right? And that gives people a little bit of apprehension. And I would usually just tell people, because sometimes a lot of times actually people would be like, well, why are you doing this? Like, what's in it for you? And that kind of tells me a couple of things. It tells me they really do like their agent, right? If they're asking me that question and they're saying that, I'm like, okay, they like their agent quite a bit. They just really want to do some due diligence. They think this makes sense. And so what I would usually tell people is like, what's in it for me is I understand you got a relationship, right? Breaking that relationship up is tough to do. And so this is my way to show value. This is my way to give you something valuable to start building a relationship with you. I don't know what it's going to lead to. That's kind of why we're all in business and sales, right? Like, I don't know what this is going to turn into, but as long as you are open to potentially firing your agent, even if you're 2% open, that's fine. But if you're totally like, in your heart, you're never going to fire them and there's no chance in hell, no matter what I find, then maybe it does make sense to walk away. But if there's at least a chance and you're at least open-minded, let's do this. So that's the approach I used to take. Like that was like literally kind of like would happen quite a bit, those conversations. Now I'm not so hard pressed in the AOR. It's just like, let's just see let's just get in and do the due diligence and see what we find. And then we can talk next steps from there. That's kind of what I've more so been about the last, I guess you could say 2 years versus being so boxed in on the first meeting. But either way works for you. If you want to work on AOR only and that's all you want to focus on, that I got respect for that, right? Like it's a good use of your time. If you have a book, you're established, whatever, there's a lot of good reasons for taking that approach, but just that's the talk track I use to kind of get around that and just get to the next step at least.
But you being flexible in having that fallback position over the last 24 months versus not before that, it's pretty obvious talking to you behind the scenes. Like it's responsible for 2 to 3xing, maybe even 4xing your yearly revenue.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly helped.
You went from being like a $150 guy to, considerably more than that per year.
Yeah, and I do attribute a lot of it to that, being flexible now, and having the trust from my agency to basically be like my own CEO of my own book and the deals I want to work on in my own pipeline, right? Where in the past it was dictated to me, like this is the only deals we're working on. No, if we hire you as an agent, we understand there's nuance in the sales game, right? We understand every buyer's a little bit different. They're at different levels. They have different, and like you just said, it's worked out really well for me to be more flexible. So that's all it worked well for me. But I have, man, because I did the AOR literally only for 7 years. So that can work. It's just, this has worked well for me to pivot a little bit and to open up some other opportunities I would have missed out on.
Anything else on your first meeting formula?
No, that's kind of the gist of it. I mean, I think we covered it pretty thoroughly. No, I don't have much more to add to it. It's don't overthink it. Keep it simple. You should really do it in a short amount of time. If the guy wants to talk, feel free to take an hour, whatever, meet your buyer, kind of where they're at, match their style. You can do these online. They work really well online, I think, this kind of framework or formula for a first meeting. So,
and if your initial cold call, like especially if you're using our daily prospecting tracker, if your initial cold call transitions from, what is due diligence into this whole conversation, then that's technically a meeting. And so go ahead and, put a meeting down. I mean, that's a meeting had. They've heard you out. They hear your value proposition. You've asked them questions about their business. They've asked you questions. You guys have come to an understanding of we're moving forward in this direction, or we're not moving forward. And so that's a first meeting. So I think a lot of times, or at least that was hard for me to wrap my head around, was that I was having more, I guess, quote unquote meetings than I thought.
Yeah.
I was getting frustrated. I'm like, oh, I'm only on like one meeting, a week or every other week. But that was actually in person. But I was, when I started doing this, you're having a lot more like in-depth conversations, and you think that, based off of your qualifiers to count as a meeting.
Yeah. I will add this. If you keep track of your stats, right, and what's happening, because maybe let's just say you have a lot of these first quote unquote meetings that are just conversations that flow into a meeting, and then you're stalling out. Well, maybe you need to start setting a separate meeting, right? So maybe you cut yourself. We've talked about this before, but you cut yourself off in that first call. So you explain it. You don't just stop. Like, I can't tell you what due diligence is. I got to meet first. Like, that's dumb. Don't do that. If they ask you, what do you mean by due diligence? Or they ask questions, answer one of them. But then before you give them a chance to respond, just be like, hey, there's more I could talk about, but I know I'm catching out of the blue. Are you sure? Can we just put 10, 15 minutes on a calendar? That's why I was calling you. I know it's a sales call. You're busy. Just want to be respectful of your time. And then I can just talk for 15 minutes more, a little bit more in detail, learn a little bit more about your program, some background, and then figure out if it makes sense from there. Because I think if you set the time aside, you're going to get less ghostings will occur, right? Less people flaking out because now they've set the time on their calendar to meet. And it's a good filtering process to let you know if they're serious or not. But again, I've had several conversations that, they immediately clicked with them. They're just a type A type, what I mean? They don't need to think about things. And boom, I got the policies in my inbox, 30 minutes later or that next day, I review them, we get back in touch and we win the deal, right? So it's like both work, but just be mindful of what's occurring. And if you are, this is a roadblock for you, then maybe you do need to set a separate meeting up, right?
All right. Great pod. If you want to go further down the rabbit hole with what Micah's talking about, and like the actual script that we just talked about is in the Producer Playbook. We've got first meeting, research meeting, how to close, presentations, cold call scripts, objection handling. I mean, if you're trying to build a book of business from scratch, Micah has something, has a module about it in the Producer Playbook. And so I think it's definitely worth your time. It's made a big difference for me. And if you're that guy trying to build a book of business from scratch without a mentor, without help, I can't recommend it enough. Also, another shout out to Insurance Xdate. Appreciate you guys. There will be a link to their stuff in the show notes as well. And then yours truly is fully back on the wagon in regards to the newsletter. So getting back to kind of the original Max Revenue newsletter that started to really, I guess, kind of get us on the map. Maybe a little back to being a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Less Chat GPT and a little more human, and a few more hot takes, little less reverent. Is that the word I'm looking for? Irreverent, a little more irreverent. That's what I'm looking for. So we're getting back
constipation.
Trying to get back to basics.
A little creative constipation.
Yeah, we had some creative constipation there for a while, and we have since it has moved through, and I feel like we're, as coming into a new space. So
let me say one thing, last but not least, and I'm excited to read the new but old newsletters coming out here. Dude, check out our YouTube channel. Go subscribe to it. Our subscribers have been like hockey sticking the last 3-4 weeks, which is awesome for us. I got live cold calls on there, which a lot of people said have been super helpful to see. If anything, it should instill confidence.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I'm telling you right now, none of these other clowns are getting on there and recording cold calls. I can tell you that. Number one, they're not even in the trenches. And secondly, they don't have the cojones to record themselves making a cold call and put it up. I can promise you that.
Yeah,
they're in their ivory tower selling you one-on-one coaching packages while they don't pick up the damn phone one time.
And if you watch them, you can tell I'm not just cherry picking my good calls.
Yeah.
I put a lot of crappy calls on there. But no, yeah, seriously, go check it out. We put our podcast. If you're listening to this on Spotify and you want to watch it on video, you can see me and Trey's facial expressions. So, and then we got shorts, we got comedy, we got everything for you.
We got mustaches.
If there's, I don't know, we can make that work. But if there's something you want to see a video done on, yeah, if you guys want to see a video done on something, shoot me a LinkedIn message and I'll make a video on that topic. I've done one on that. So yeah, we're just trying to help people out, put out free content on YouTube. So other than that, man.
And to be totally honest with you, once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we actually can start to get paid from YouTube. No, it's going to be minuscule, but we're trying to be thousandaires from this thing, so support us.
Or just donate. I think there's a donate button on YouTube if you guys want to just give money to us and you feel generous,
Yeah.
We'll gladly go golf with your money.
That's true. Yeah, I'll buy my kids snow cones and go golfing with your money. That's about what I'm making off Max Revenue.
Yeah.
But anyways, for the love of the game. All right, with that, we will close it out. Again, everything's in the show notes, and Micah's right. Go check out YouTube, subscribe, check out all the links in the show notes. We appreciate you. We know you're busy out there doing your thing, and you take time to listen to two idiots talk about selling insurance, and we appreciate it, and we don't take it for granted. So thank you. And with that, I'll bid you adieu. Adios, everyone.
Adios.